Okay, the time is 11 a.m. Central European Time. So I think without further ado, let's just get cracking. Before we begin, this session is recorded. So if you're uncomfortable with being a part of the recording, turn off your camera or drop out of the meeting. And we will be uploading this session to our YouTube channel within the next few weeks or so. But let's get started. So first of all, welcome to the virtual line from the Microsoft Security User Group. Today we have Stephan from SmarterSoft, who's going to be talking about Key Vault, which is obviously a very exciting topic and covers pretty much everybody here. I would imagine we all use Key Vault. But before we begin and hand the floor over to Stephan, we've got some housekeeping rules we just want to cover. So this is our virtual lunch and learn, which usually lasts around 40 to 45 minutes, but up to an hour with questions. Of course, we want as many questions in as possible. Use the meeting chat for any questions as we go, and we'll monitor those chats, myself, San, and Haflidi. We'll jump in, but also we'll run a little Q&A after the session. As mentioned, we'll share the presentation on our YouTube channel. It won't be immediately after the session, but when Stephan gives us the green light to upload that, we will make it available to everybody. Also, stay muted and raise your hand if you actually want to speak in the call. But we'd appreciate if you could all just stay on mute while Stephan is running the session. And reactions are highly appreciated because that makes this very interactive. So without further ado, Stephan, the floor is yours. Take over.
Let me start by sharing my screen. I hope this works. Let me take this screen out and side. So, hi, I'm Stephan van Rooji. I'm a Microsoft MVP in security. I'm a software architect. I do a lot of open source development, and I'm from the Netherlands. So, what is our objective today? We built a lot of multi-tenant applications, and we want to make sure they are protected as much as possible. And if we ever get breached, we want to limit the exposure time. But first, I have a question for everybody. Can everybody in your tenant create applications? Just react with a thumbs up or a smile or an O face if you have either of those. So by default, everybody can go to the portal, app registrations, press new registration, and you can create an app for your tenant. This is not always the best idea. I hope it's disabled, and then everybody should get a screen like this. Please, first tip, configure this way. You don't want all users to configure apps. Okay, so we are gonna create a new multi-tenant app. You also saw the screen, register an application. We're gonna enter a name. It's multi-tenant. We select multi-tenant. We don't need a redirect URI because we are creating a client credential app. So the last checkbox, text box, you can leave empty, no issues. Then on the side, you have API permissions. We're going to set it up to allow users.readbasic.all. This is an application permission, and it does require admin consent. So let me so you need admin consent to allow these things. then you enter this screen. I did not grant admin consent yet, but there's a really easy button. If you press it, admin consent is granted for all the scopes you define. This only works in the tenant where the app is created. If you want to grant this app access to other tenants, you need to create an admin consent link with the application ID, send it to the owner, and they can accept your application. This is how it works with all applications, all multi-tenant apps. The admin gets a message. Do you want to allow this app to access whatever consent you are wishing for? And you either are granted or you're not granted, and then you have to talk with the customer again. So I created a graph reader multi-tenant app. It's multi-tenant app. It has this permission, and I granted admin consent. Okay, let's create a client secret. Who does this? Thumbs up, anyone? No one does client secret. Yeah, I don't like. Oh, I see there's a question from Elias. Is that correctly?
No question. I was just showing that I did this once.
Okay, no problem. So please do not use client secret. If those leak, yeah, you're in trouble. I created a key vault, and I follow the sample from Microsoft. I generate a certificate in the key vault. It's a self-signed certificate. One thing to mention is you should set the lifetime action type to email, because you don't want key vault to auto-renew, because then stuff breaks. So I always switch this to email me when it's about to expire. And then I downloaded the certificate that I generated in the Key Vault, and I uploaded it for the application under the certificates tab. Yay! Client secret, the client certificates. Okay, I have a small demo. I'm going to show the code afterwards. So let's run my app. I'm using the HTTP client that is available in Visual Studio. So you can easily create a HTTP file, specify a request, execute it in Visual Studio. It really helps if you're developing an API. So I'm going to send a request. Was not ready yet. Waiting the response. I think it's not. It's sending all these strange issues down here. Because it is trying to do interactive authentication with the Key Vault. So what I did is I have this app. It takes the certificate from the Key Vault and it asks for a token at Entra, and then it will request 3 users from my tenant with only the ID and the display name specified. How does the code look? Code looks like this. So I have the certificate client. Certificate client, I download the certificate, and I use the certificate to get a token from Entra. This code looks like this. Client certificate credential, give me a token for the graph scope. Then I have a token, and I'm going to get information from the graph API. Send a token. This is nothing. This is all in the samples you provided by Microsoft. So the code. I have a certificate. I download the certificate. I use the certificate to get a token, and I use the token to get details from the graph API. These are the steps: load certificate, create unsigned JWT, sign the JWT with the certificate, use the signed JWT to request a token from Entra. All good? Does anybody notice any issues here? And respond in the chat if you don't want to say it on camera. Are there any issues with my code? I see someone with the right answer. Some people are responding with the answer. Let's assume we have an attacker that's able to deploy a new version of our function app. Instead of using it to sign into Graph, they download the certificate as before. They post a full certificate to the external server, and then you return whatever you want in the Azure Function app. So I also have a demo for this. Let's do something else. Send a request. We'll execute almost the same code. There's my certificate. I truncated it, so please try steal it. It does not work because it's not complete. But you get the point. My application can download the certificate. If this happens, which is not very hard because, and at the top we download the certificate. Yeah, the application can do whatever it wants with it, but this is the default sample. The default sample is download the certificate, use it to authenticate or to do whatever you want. So the attacker stole the certificate. What happens? Certificate is stolen. 360 days exposed. This is the default lifetime of the certificate. I created it a few days ago, so if someone would steal the certificate, we get pwned 360 days. I don't like that. This is the first issue. Okay, second issue. Attacker gains access to my account or an account that has access to the Key Vault. You press the download PFX button and they have the certificate and you're pwned again. Okay. So the issue is all the default code downloads the certificate and uses the certificate on the side of the application. Do we actually need the certificate? Does anyone see a way we could get around this? Or do we just need the signature? I think we just need the signature. We don't need the entire certificate. Let's see if we can use the same code, but change it a little bit so we don't download the full certificate anymore. Apparently, the Key Vault has some APIs that allow you to create a signature for the data you send. I'll put the link in the chat later on. Or I'll just do it now. Do that? No, I cannot copy it. I'll put the link in the chat later on. The Key Vault has an API. You post data to it and you get the signature back. This is exactly what we need for our application. Okay, what we want is the certificate securely stored in Key Vault. We create an unsigned JWT. We sign the JWT with the key in the Key Vault, so we don't download it. And then we use it to request a token from the API. You can do this yourself, or you can try out this package. I spend a lot of time investigating how the JWT works when you're using it as a client credential. I made a small package for it that everybody can use, and that would make it a lot easier. I also have a small demo of this. You have almost the same code, but the with certificate line is replaced with Key Vault certificate. And all the code that is shown today will be on GitHub and will be shared at the end. So no worries, no need to copy. It will be there at the end. So what we're going to do is we create the same application with the client ID, but we are not going to download the certificate. How does this code look? This is the same code as before, but I changed it to use mcell instead of Azure.identity. It's all the same. You create a token with your client, with your certificate on the in the application, and you send it to Entra, and you get a token for your resource. This code, it had this code with certificate, with a certificate name. It's changed to with Key Vault certificate. What this code does, yes, it's open source, so I can navigate it. The source is included with it. With Key Vault certificate, this code eventually calls, let me see where it is, calls this code in the end, and it says application builder with client assertion. This is the asynchronous way to create the assertion in your application, and it is passed to this method, which is then passed to this method. I know, sorry, it's a little bit complicated. What it does is get certificate info from Key Vault. Here you see that it actually still gets the certificate from the Key Vault. Get certificate async. It's the same code as before. But this code only downloads the public part of the certificate. This does not download the full certificate. So it still needs some details from the certificate, because it needs to make the certificate name, the key ID, and the an ID that's in the token. It's the base 46 URL encoded certificate hash. I don't know why it's not just the certificate hash, but believe me, it's this complicated. Okay, so I'm going back to where this code was called from. Oh, that does not work. So it's here, get signed token with Key Vault key. And it takes the unsigned token and then asks the Key Vault to sign the data. So the actual signing of the data happens inside of the so it says sign data async, and it sends the unsigned token to the Key Vault. Hey, give me a signature. You get a signature back. The signature is base46 URL encoded. You attach it to the unsigned token, and you have a signed token. This is then used to call. Where is it? This is then used in the confidential client app builder to get a token for the same scope. So effectively, we do the same request, but signing the token does not happen in the application. It happens in the Key Vault. I can call the same code. And you'll see I've got the same data. Sorry, Greg, I see you have a question.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. If you just want to read that. When you say you have a full cert, do you mean private key as well with the password?
James, is a question, right? James,
Yeah,
do you
right.
mean when you press the download from the portal or downloading it in the application? So if I go back to, you were asking about this call, if I'm correct. Download certificate async, right? So if I hover over this, you should be able to see this. Then it says the cert only contains the public key. This method attempts to download the managed secret which contains the full certificate. If you do not have permission to get the secret, you will get an error response. So this line actually downloads the certificate, and it's not protected with a password at all. So it's just, this gives you X509 certificate, and it has the private key. And that is exactly the issue. So in this case, if you follow all these steps, you see that it calls the Key Vault to say, hey, I have this unsigned token and I want it signed. Please help me sign it. Give me a signature. So I can go in there with assertion, signed token. So what this does is it still gets the certificate info from the Key Vault, but then it signs, it does the signing in the Key Vault. So it takes the unsigned token and it asks the cryptography client to sign it, and the signature is then base46 URL encoded and added to the unsigned token. I'll go back to the slides. is there, no, sorry. So I have this new way where I ask the Key Vault to sign my certificate. Does everybody think my certificate is protected at the moment? Aflidi is nodding no. So if you generate a certificate in the Key Vault, by default, it says advanced policy configuration not configured. Not configured means let's just use the default. And the default is everybody can export the private key. So you press not configured and you say export private key no. This means no one can export the private key, not even the owner of the Key Vault. This is very important because we don't want the private key to leak. So I have two certificates in my Key Vault. I have one certificate that does not have this set, and I have a certificate that has this set. So you cannot export the last one, but you can still export the first one. Okay, so we have a new attacker. They deploy a new Azure function, sign the JWT with the key in the Key Vault, request the token from Enta, and return the token. I hope they never attack our Azure Function app, but in this case, we are only exposed for 3,600 seconds, which is the default lifetime of the token. They will not be able to export the certificate. Even I, as an admin of the Key Vault, cannot export the certificate. I see Malik is pointing out something correctly. If someone can deploy a new Azure function, you have much bigger problems than someone pressing buttons in the Key Vault. Yes, but a lot of organizations are using continuous deployment at the moment. That means the attack phase, the attack surface also widens because, yeah, if they hack a GitHub account, they might be able to deploy a new version of this app. And I'm not saying you shouldn't secure those. I'm just saying we want to, because this is a multi-tenant app, this certificate might be valid for I don't know how many tenants. And with the current state of the monitoring tools, you cannot monitor multi-tenant apps. They do not have the Key Vault. They do not have the Microsoft Defender stuff for multi-tenant apps yet. So I'm not saying that you should not protect all the other stuff. I'm just saying if you start here, you limit the exposure time. Does that answer your question, Malik? Okay, you're welcome. I also have a demo of the last part. So I still have the same code, but instead of using the token to call graph, I'm gonna return the token in the client. So I'm gonna execute this. Yep. I know I'm gonna show access token here. I'm not gonna scroll all the way to the end, but here is an actual access token, and I'm gonna show how that looks in the So I have the token pasted in here, and you see I have the scope I wanted, and what's interesting you can see on the token is this claim. This claim specifies app ID ACR. I'm not sure what it's the abbreviation for, but it says number 2, and this is the value you get if the client is using certificates. So if you are using a client secret, you can you will get this with number 1. If we build a custom API, we just block all requests with number 1 because we don't like client secrets. We only want certificates, so we block number 1. I'm not sure if you can do that on, for instance, on the Graph API, but if we build a custom API, claims that have this value set to 1, we block those. By the way, this is DevToys. It's a great app for all developers. You have all these, I don't know how many handy tools. You can generate a hash for a file. You can base 46 decode an image or encode. You have a color blindness simulator, upload a file and say, hey, I'm colorblind. Show me how this looks if you're colorblind, to check accessibility of your website. But let me get back to my app. How does this code look? This code, get the token, write the token to the response, and steal it. But I'm not saying that I ever hope that our app gets hacked, but at least this way they won't have 1 year of access to our multi-tenant app. This is not the only thing you should do with your Key Vault. I also have some general recommendations. Always use a managed identity to access the Key Vault. If you're using secret, then you have another secret to keep. And why are you keeping your secret for your Key Vault and not have Microsoft handle it? You should always review role assignments on your Key Vaults. You can do this with the Graph API or with the Azure API. You can do this in the portal. Just make a process of periodically reviewing those. Limit network traffic. The Key Vault I made is available for all networks. Yeah, you might want to change that it's only limited to Azure services, VNet, or it's a great way to improve security on your Key Vault. You should monitor access. You can monitor, you can have the logs from your Key Vault sent to a lot of monitoring things. You can also send it to Defender for Cloud. That's also a great way to see what is happening. And lastly, disable Vault access policies. This was the old way to configure access policies for your Key Vault. It's now switched over to the normal role assignments. Please use those. They have one place where you can set all the access to your Key Vault. At this point, I only researched the part how it works for client assertions. But I think there's some more investigation needed. Last night, I found that through some Googling that there seems to be a NuGet package with an RSA Key Vault provider. This provides RSA implementation with the key still in Key Vault, and this might be used in other use cases where you need a certificate to be available on your computer. I would like to see a Key Vault backed X59 certificate too, because that would allow you to use the certificate in all the other places that require a certificate. I saw Ronald was in the call. This was what triggered me. You might want to use it as a client certificate in an HTTP client. One thing to note, all the RSA implementations in .NET currently are all synchronous, but to get the signing done in the Key Vault, it's an async operation. So they might need to do some stuff about that. I would say that there might be an open source project that has that gives you the certificate but leaves the key in the Key Vault. Not making any promises, but I do a lot of open source work, so this might be coming. This was my talk, and I hope there are a lot of questions on the Key Vault stuff. This is where you can all find the source code that I presented. This is my blog where you can see all the research that I've done around this topic, multi-tenant apps, Intune. There's a lot of stuff to find. You can find me on Twitter and you can find me on GitHub, and it all links together. So that was my talk, and I hope you enjoyed it and made your Key Vault just a little bit safer.
Thanks, Stephan. That was a great presentation. Do we have any questions in the chat, or does anyone want to unmute and ask any questions on the call? Silence. That usually means that it's been a good presentation. People are still trying to process what's been presented. But I have a question around password rotation. How would I go about implementing a good password rotation policy and regime in Azure with Key Vault?
Yeah. So are you talking about when you're using client secrets, or are you talking about when you're using the certificates and you want to roll them over?
Maybe you could give both examples.
Yeah, so in the presentation, you saw that I switched it to email the users. That's always a good step because you don't want the Key Vault to roll over your certificates. Let me do the certificate part first. Azure has an API. You can request which applications have a certificate that might be expiring soon. You can ask, hey, give me all the applications, give me their certificate lifetimes. If you set it up in a way that's manageable, you will be able to have a script that checks all the lifetimes of the certificates daily, and then goes to the Key Vault, says, hey, let's roll over this certificate, download the public part of the certificate and upload it to the application. That's possible to automate. Rolling over the client secrets, yeah, you can ask the Graph API, give me all the applications and the lifetime of the secrets. You cannot get the secrets, but you can get information about the secrets. And it says this secret is valid until certain date time. And once that is close enough, you create an extra secret. There's also a Graph API call for that. On the application registration, you say, give me a new secret. It returns the secret, and you can upload the secret to the Key Vault with the secret client SDK. So you might be able to automate stuff like that and then run it in DevOps on a cron job or something, or an automation or whatever suits your needs.
Perfect.
Are there any other questions? I think it's total silence for now.
Looks like that, yes.
Okay, well,
I have a question regarding when you say to limit the network access to the key vault, do you completely limit the access by disabling all public access to the key vault itself and using like a private endpoint or a private link? Or do you like just allow specific traffic and then you limit through the firewall? What would be the best practice in this way?
The best practice is, of course, using the private endpoints, because then you say this app has access to the key vault and no other app has access to the key vault. But if that's not feasible or not possible, I know some Azure services have support for VNets, but don't have support for private endpoints just yet. In those cases, I would say go for the VNet. But if private endpoint is possible, that's for sure the best way.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, the best tip is mark them as not exportable. That really helps in making sure that if you are ever breached, even if you don't know it, because if they replace the function app, download the certificate, and roll back to the old version, no one will, you might not notice, but if they stole the certificate, they have a year of access. I'm not saying that a year, the default lifetime in the key vault, is the best way. I would say maybe a month, and then make a script that automatically renews it. And in an application registration, you can have multiple secrets, multiple certificates. So just create a new one, and then after some time, because there might be some caching around, remove the old certificate. That's how I would do it. I don't see there any more questions. Oh, I see there's a Acme bot for automation on certificates. That might be worth checking out. And also the DevToys app that Haflidi put in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Stephan, for a really good presentation. And you're going to be presenting next round to a few different forums. So that's why we're going to wait on uploading the recording to the YouTube channel. So as soon as you give the green light for that, we'll have that available to everybody as well. So
I saw Sana had a question, or was it saying goodbye?
I just want to say goodbye. Thank you so much, Stephan. It's a really great presentation and lovely to see you again.
You're welcome.
Okay,
and
thanks everybody.
Any more questions after you've seen the recording when it's published, just send me a message on Twitter and I can see if I can help you guys out.
Thank you very much, Stephan. It was really great having you on our meetup. Thank you very much for presenting.
You have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Likewise.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, have a nice day.